please wait for instructions, or probably follow Rachel and Richard, who will know exactly where they're going, and we'll follow them. Now, what we've then tabled is item 2 on the agenda, is appointment of independent members. This is covered on pages 7 to 12 of your papers. So what we're asking you to do is to approve the appointment of independent audit committee members, Christine Fraser and Jennifer Whitten, and that's a formal endorsement. Everybody's had details in the past, but we just need to formally ratify it at a public meeting. Apologies, Steve, you may not have had details because you weren't actually on this committee at the time. Exactly. But hopefully everybody is happy to support that. Can I just have a show of hands? Everybody in favour? Okay, so if we just carry on with that, the proposal is that Christine's appointed for an initial term of 4 years and Jennifer for an initial term of 3 years. But also, just to clarify the situation, that our existing independent member, Mark Hatcliffe, who can't be with us today, had the interesting arrangement where he wasn't given a fixed term, which doesn't seem a good idea for anybody. So what we've discussed with Mark is that his term remains for a further 2 years. And then the fourth point is that we agree that each independent member be eligible for a second term by mutual agreement. Then just by way of note, you can see why so many people queued up to become independent members, because the remuneration allowance is set at £650 a year. So that clearly must be a big attraction. So that is for us to note.
Detail.
Yep.
The length of the second term.
Yep.
Could that be specified?
Probably should. I think the assumption was it was going to be 4 years. I think that was what we had in mind.
Yeah, I think it was, although we can confirm that at the time when we get nearer to the
Now, what I suggest, and we won't give you a test on this at the end to remember who we all are, but it probably makes sense if we go around the room and just introduce ourselves very briefly with a little bit of background, so you just have an inkling of who's going to be contributing to the rest of the meeting. So if we can start and work down that side, I think that would be best.
Okay, good morning. My name's John Leach and I'm councillor with Bath and North and Somerset, and I've been on the committee for what is it now, about 10 months, since May of last year.
Good morning, I'm Dave Addison. I'm a councillor from South Gloucestershire representing Stoke Gifford, and I've also been on the councils on this committee since just after the elections last May.
Good morning, Councillor Ben Burton. I'm the councillor from South Gloucestershire Council for Frenchy and Downend. And like Dave, I've also been on this committee since the election in May.
Thank you. I'm Councillor Steve Pearce and I'm incompetent, as I've just demonstrated. This is my first and hopefully my last committee meeting. I've been leader of my group on Bristol City Council and most recently acting Lord Mayor. So it would not have been appropriate for me to be here before.
I think you should just clarify, Steve. I hope that it wasn't that you hate audit committee; it's that you're standing down from council. I just think you could, just to stop people being too concerned.
I've done my shift, Chair.
Tim.
I'm Tim Rippington. I'm a councillor for Brislington East in Bristol, and I've been on this committee for about 2 years, I think. I can't remember.
Councillor David Wilcox for Lockleys in Bristol, and I've been on the committee just over 2 years, I think.
Hi, Councillor Andrew Brown, also a councillor in Bristol. I've been on the committee since May, June last year.
And Andrew, you shouldn't be too modest and just declare that you're chair of Bristol Audit Committee as well. Yeah, just for the record.
You've done it for me.
Yeah.
I'm Tessa Fitzjohn. I'm councillor for Bedminster, the first Green in Bedminster. I'm actually standing down in May. And when I joined Audit, I wasn't sure I had the skills as an arts producer and ex-arts council officer, but I think they've been quite useful and I really enjoyed it. So I welcome anybody else. Nice to see you too. More women's.
Hello, I'm Councillor Toby Simon from Bathwick on Bath and North East Somerset Council, another of the 10-month members.
Hi, Dan Dickinson. I'm the Interim Director of Legal and Governance and also the Combined Authorities Monitoring Officer.
I'm Richard Ennis. I'm the Interim Chief Executive.
I'm Jeff Gollop, and I've been chair of this committee since I think it was 2017, which is almost longer than most of the others put together. But that's that I've obviously done something to deserve that, but I'm not quite sure what.
And I'm Rachel Muston. I'm Strategic Director of Resources for the Combined Authority and the Section 73 Officer.
I'm Tim Milgate. I work in the Democratic Services team and I'm clerk for this committee.
And I'm Solange Russell. I'm the Head of Finance and Deputy Section 73 Officer.
My name.
I thought I would just join in and also try and figure out which button to press. So I'm Christine Fraser, and new independent member.
I'm Jennifer Whitten, again, new independent member.
My name's Tariq Rahman and I'm from Internal Audit.
My name is Barry Morris. I'm the audit partner from Grant Thornton that certifies the accounts. I've taken over for the 23-24 year, but like Jeff, I was here at the beginning in 2017 as well.
Morning, my name is Jeff Ring. I'm Director of One West in the Avon Pension Fund, so I lead on the engagement for internal audit, and I've also had the dubious honour of being here since 2017 at the start with Jeff and Barry.
Right, thank you all. Tim, do we have any apologies for today?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from our independent member, Mr. Mark Hatcliffe.
Thank you. Members, do we have any declarations of interest? No? Yep.
Yes, I'd like to declare that I used a birthday bus pass last month.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm just being prompted. I'm so used to seeing Steve at meetings that we've also got to just confirm that Steve Pearce has replaced Zoe Goodman, who is no longer a member of the Labour Party in Bristol. So it's our pleasure to have you with us, Steve. So, item 5, minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of December, pages 13 to 22. Looking for any comments on the minutes, or hopefully agreement that we approve them. No comments, so everybody happy we approve those? Yep.
The officers are, but the councillors aren't named. Is that standard practice?
It tends to be at audit and scrutiny meetings that it's attributable to somebody rather than a specific person. It's a good point to ask, and I think, Tim, that is normal practice.
Yes, Chair. I mean, normally it's just a summary of the points made that's set out in the minutes rather than if we keep going there, Councillor X said and Councillor Y said, it gets very cumbersome.
Yeah, what we established in the past is that because we are not an executive committee, it's not simply voting for or against a decision, so that we wanted the points made expressed and more of a challenge, but we in a sense wanted the tone of the meeting conveyed, which is actually a very difficult one to get right. But we've established that in the past that it's better not to. I mean, that's an issue members could raise at the first meeting of the next civic year and discuss. But I'm guessing that actually keeping it that way is often safer and easier for members. We don't particularly want a situation where 4 years down the line someone's looking back and said, "You said so and so." Because in the practical world of local government, it's possible positions have changed in that time. So I think that's probably okay, but we can bear it in mind. So just checking everybody's in favour of approving those minutes. Yes, thank you. So item 6 is items from the public, and we've got 2 questions have been received. Rachel, Dan, are you responding to these because we don't specifically have answers? So Mike, I'm sorry to say we don't have specific answers, but I'm suggesting that we ask Rachel and Daniel is the Chief Financial Officer and the Monitoring Officer to respond to those questions and share them with me, with my deputy, and with Andrew as Chair of Bristol Audit Committee, because we want to know they've been answered, but we need it to be done properly with the proper information being available. Is that a fair summation? Yeah. And Mike, you have a statement. That statement has been circulated, but you're very welcome to speak to it, but you don't have to read every word of it. So
no, I know.
Over to you. I think the norm is that you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Yes, my concerns, which I've raised already. I'm
not sure the microphone's on. Can we just check?
We just check with the.
Hello.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Your mic's been picked up on the stream. Yeah. That's fine.
So good morning. Yeah, my concerns, which I've raised at Bristol, were around kind of flexing of procurement arrangements, and I'm concerned with what I see at WECA of potentially the same things in terms of WECA's given about £300,000 worth of grants to stepping up, as far as I can see. Concerns around sort of fairness and equity. If you're allowing late applications, was that the case for everybody, or do some people get special treatment depending on who they are? Not sort of doing initial due diligence checks on approval. Again, I mean, it's like getting a job application and then saying shortlisting, even though they don't meet the requirements. I would have thought you'd try to do a lot of the due diligence up front. And also concerns whether, what those checks were and whether they were met, particularly in the light of accounts now been filed for stepping up, and they have a balance sheet which is incomplete and doesn't balance. They prepare these micro accounts. I don't know much about company accounting, but there is a requirement for that, even those to have a balance sheet. If you look at the accounts, they don't balance. I'm also concerned about monitoring of spend on these projects, and how we know that we're getting value for money from them. I mean, what sort of scrutiny is there of once the money's been handed out, what's been achieved and how? That's my sort of speak to the statement. Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, so just to confirm, so myself with the monitoring officer will look into the issues that you've raised and then come back through the chair with responses in due course.
Right, Mike, thank you for raising those, and therefore we will be back to you when we're in a position to do so. Okay, thank you. So I have no specific chair's announcements. So move on to item 8, which is report back from main committee. Now I'm going to ask David to respond on that in a mo, because David was actually at the committee. But there was an item raised at the committee that I want to comment on, and I'm going to read from a draft note which I'll pass to you, Tim, so that you've got it. So this is an item I want to share with you. I hope members will endorse what I'm saying and support me in submitting these comments to the committee on the 15th of March. At the last WECA committee meeting, the Mayor raised concerns about confidentiality. He suggested meeting with David and I to discuss this, and that eventually happened at the end of last month. I hope members agree with me that I confirmed that Audit Committee took confidentiality very seriously and recognised that on occasion we would receive information that was not in the public domain. We recognised that we have to be trusted by officers to receive that information. I would just add, my conversations with officers have indicated that trust remains in place and is in place. I made the point to the Mayor that if there was ever a deliberate breach of such confidentiality, I would expect the matter to be referred to the monitoring officer for appropriate action to be taken. However, I also stressed that if there was no evidence making an allegation in public was not appropriate, as it damaged the authority as well as the integrity of the committee. I would of course emphasise that confidentiality is appropriate when commercially sensitive or personal information is being discussed, but not if it's being used to prevent information that would be of concern to residents and councillors, or if it is about poor practice and poor governance. So that is just what I wanted to share with members, and I didn't feel it appropriate for me to make that statement to committee without having sought endorsement from members. Does anybody have anything they want to comment, or would you be happy to endorse that statement? Yeah, Toby.
Yes, I'm happy to endorse the statement. I think it strikes the right balance. My only comment is that as co-chair of the Standards Committee in Bath and North East Somerset, if the monitoring officer here had found difficulties about the behaviour of people at constituent unitary authorities, I hope that they would be referred to their home Standards Committee.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely right. And to me, it's really important that we all recognise this, because I cannot expect the 3 statutory officers to share information with us if we are not totally committed to it. So I'm very keen that we actually reaffirm our commitment to respecting confidentiality, and we will it will be an item on each agenda as a reminder for the future to make sure that we're all completely up to speed on that. But I do not like comments being made that imply breach of confidentiality when I don't believe it's happened. But if there is the slightest evidence that it's happened, I'd expect it to be dealt with by the appropriate committee, and the best place to deal with it is within the individual authority. So. Oh, right. Do you want...
Yeah, just very quickly. Sorry. Thank you. Just to offer a little bit of clarification if members might find that helpful. When members are sitting on a committee of the Command Authority, you're subject to the Command Authority Code, and I am your monitoring officer for those purposes. So if a matter arose in respect of your membership on one of our committees, that would be something I'd deal with under our process and code. If something came to my attention that wasn't within my remit, but I thought was in your remit as a unitary authority, in that scenario, I'd be handing back over to the unitary authority's monitoring officer. I hope that was helpful.
As long as it's caught one way or another, I think we're entirely happy. Okay, so can I just show of hands if everybody's happy with that statement? Yeah, thank you. Right, so David, any comments on the meeting? And if I just for Christine and Jennifer's purposes, what we've got to a stage now where we now have a slot where we report on issues from Audit Committee to the committee, which is the Metro Mayor and the local authority leaders. So we report in, but this is also a way of reporting back. And part of the reason for the reporting back is some of the statutory recommendations and key recommendations from the Grant Thornton Value for Money report related to the relationships at meetings. And therefore, some members of this committee actually have more important things to do than watch webcasts of the committee meeting. So this is an opportunity for whichever one of us is at that meeting to report back so members are aware of what's happened. So David, over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. And I, of course, endorse the comments that you just made. I think it's important to note that I read out a statement to the full committee at that meeting, which talked about not having adjournments during the meeting where papers were changed. And 5 minutes after I read out my statement, there was a 10-minute comfort break, which turned into a half an hour plus adjournment where papers were rewritten. So we do really need to emphasise the fact that this should not be happening and deals should not be done during the committee meeting.
The issues that come out of that are wider than the confusion for members of the public trying to understand what's happening. It's actually that things that are not capable of being scrutinised before the decision is taken are suddenly being put in place, and scrutiny committee and backbenchers in general don't have the ability to even contribute to that discussion. So in terms of governance, it's not an appropriate way forward. Tim, if you can make a note of that comment from David to add to our list to report back to the next committee meeting, because I think we must keep on saying it, even if no notice is taken of us. So, right, thank you for that, David. So item 9 is our forward plan, pages 23 to 28. Solange.
So this is just a schedule of the elements that are intended to go forward for the audit committees in the next year. And it's over to the audit committee for review and comment.
Any comments from anybody? David.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one question, and it ties in with the next item as well. I don't see any mention of a rework constitution coming back to the audit committee. Where are we with redefining the constitution, please?
Dan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm acutely aware that perhaps a little bit too much optimism. I came into the authority wanting to bring forward a packet of constitutional measures. That work is still going on, but the way we're going to tackle it now, as I think the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is looking to start a task and finish deep dive process into constitutional changes, and the hope and the intention is to bring through a package of measures through that. Hopefully, I would assume on a cross-party basis, and I'm busy in the background pulling together some proposals to take to that group to start that process off.
What's the time frame for that, please?
Well, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee prioritised their BSIP task and finish work. So we are looking at commencing the new package of constitutional review and governance task and finish group from the new financial year, I believe.
Yes, I think it's important that we do have a review, and in particular about particularly call-in arrangements for officer decisions, which is a definite gap in the system. So I would suggest that we should put it in our programme for summer or autumn meetings. So yes, summer or autumn meetings, just to flag it up that it should be in the programme, and we'll work with the Urban Scrutiny Committee to get this right.
Yeah, through you, Chair. The call-in arrangements at large are certainly one of the package of work measures that I'm having the team look at and come forward with a range of options. It's done differently in different authorities, and this authority just needs to decide how it wants to do it here. And so that is definitely, quite high on the list of measures that we're looking at and that we're going to take into the scrutiny process. And I would, of course, expect any firm proposals to come through this committee on the way to the main committee.
Andrew?
Just on the obviously the forward plan outlines some of the more informal sessions as well as the formal meetings. Are there plans in place for inductions for new members of this committee following the local election results? Local elections?
Yes, Tim and I normally arrange those each year, so we'll factor those in.
And in fact, just to add to that, part of the reason I was keen that Christine and Jennifer should join us today is almost part of the induction process, because it's hard enough for members of the constituent authorities joining us when at least they may know a little bit of how the jigsaw fits together. But for new independent members, in a way, just actually seeing us in a meeting and getting a mind around the items we're discussing is possibly even more important. So, in a sense, we're looking at, there will be partly a shared induction process, with it being targeted to specific needs of councillors and independent members. David.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. One thing that I do think is missing from the work programme is any formal look at CRSTS. It's a £500 million project, the biggest thing that the West of England Combined Authority is actually doing, and it's down as a potential work area. I really do think it needs to come to an item to Audit Committee some point during the year, please.
I'm wondering whether that's something we need to discuss with scrutiny as well, because we need to make sure that we divide the appropriate work, if you like. I think a lot of it is scrutiny, but I think there are governance issues around particularly the delivery, but also just around the decision making, and we're coming on later to key performance indicators as well. So there's a whole host of things that we do need to work out. Rachel, is it reasonable for us to look at putting that into the work programme at an appropriate time in the year, at whatever stage it can be brought with us?
Yeah, absolutely. What we do is we can take that away and, like you say, look at the respective roles of ONS and Audit Committee about which particular aspects of it are best placed at which committee, and then bring that back to a future meeting to confirm.
Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Jennifer.
Question for Daniel. As part of the Constitution review, so we've noted that the terms of reference for this committee sit within the Constitution itself. Is part of that review going to look at the terms of reference of this committee, and would that come back to this committee at some point to view or approve those terms of reference?
Yeah, I just looked to my right for a moment because I'm not aware, and I just may be misremembering of that request having been made before. So that's not currently on the list, but it can absolutely go on the list if committee feel there is a need to review the terms of reference of this committee. And of course, I would expect any committee to have a very strong say in whatever terms of reference were proffered for adoption within the Constitution at the main committee.
Thank you for raising that, because actually that is a key point, that in Bristol, the terms of reference are approved by each committee at the start of each civic year. having it in the constitution is extremely unwieldy, which is why five or 6 years ago, and Jeff Ring can confirm this, but I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, wasn't it, Jeff? There was a minute audit committee to change our terms of reference, but it never actually went anywhere. And therefore we still have a terms of reference that's not actually entirely appropriate. So whether you can look at the possibility of the committee determining its own terms of reference, which gives the ability to tweak it as circumstances change, rather than going through a constitutional change each time, that would be really helpful. But certainly what happens at the moment, I think it's fair to say, Jennifer, which is totally inappropriate, is we do what we think are our terms of reference, even though it may not be in the terms of reference, and that's not actually very good practice, but it's become necessity because we've not managed to get them amended. So perhaps if you could consider that on your long list of wishes, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I will put that on the list. I have to say, in my experience, committee terms of reference are ordinarily set out in the Constitution for clarity, but there must be a way of finding a mechanism to allow the committee to change that in between, the formal process that normally happens in a normal authority or an ordinary authority at a full council meeting. And our equivalent of that, of course, is the Combined Authority Committee. So absolutely put that on the list.
Okay, anything else? Yeah, Tim.
Yeah, Chair, this is just coming back to the report back from the main committee. You're absolutely right that it's quite easy to lose track of what happens at WECA committee meetings. I'm just wondering whether we could have a written report that just sets out the decisions that are made at a WECA committee, come back to the next audit committee, so that we know if there's anything that we need to look into from our point of view. I appreciate David's report, but it kind of just said what the problem was at the meeting, but it hasn't said what happened at that meeting that we might need to be aware of. So I'm wondering whether just a brief written report might help, or is that what you?
There's a decisions list on the website.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering in terms of things that might specifically
yeah,
impact this committee.
I think for me, Tim, I think the easiest way around would actually, putting more work in Daniel's direction, would actually be that if there was a specific requirement for amendments to be tabled, I mean, in Bristol for full council meetings, we do have a process that means that the amendment is available in writing to everybody taking part, whether that's councillors or members of the public, so that you know what it is. In WECA, there is no such mechanism, and it appears that leaders produce these amendments out of a pocket or possibly out of a hat, and no one else is aware of them until the moment at which they produce them. So actually, it would seem to me that if one had the Constitution requiring even notice, I know 6 hours before the meeting or whatever, that it was in writing and it was displayed on the screen at the meeting, at least everyone would, even if you couldn't understand the amendment, you'd at least have a piece of paper or a print you could take away and look at to understand afterwards. Is that reasonable, Daniel?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So members can, of course, propose an amendment to a resolution on the fly. Has always been the case, and I would not want to deprive members of that opportunity, because that's an important facility that they have. But people should be absolutely clear, ideally what the thought process is, what is being proposed and why, whether that's carried or defeated and why. And that's something we absolutely can get better at, and we're already doing a lot of work on that in the background. Now, the Constitution does enable a meeting to be paused for an amendment to be tabled in writing. That's usually, that's a standard provision in most standing orders dealing with amendments at meetings. Slightly different from a notice of motion at full council, where you submit that in advance to give officers a chance to, prepare points for a debate. But we can certainly, and are certainly, looking at how we can make that process clearer for all involved. Screens with it, putting on there, maybe spending a little bit more time explaining the adjournment. But we certainly are looking at facilities to be able to print out. We've asked our UA colleagues to give us enough copies to circulate to members if they're going to propose things on the day, and ideally would like things, a couple of days in advance or as far as possible in advance. But sometimes that just doesn't happen. Sometimes, members want to propose an amendment with little or no notice, and we do our best in the circumstances, and except there's a lot more that we can do, and we are doing to be better at this, to make it clear to everyone in the room what is being proposed, what is being voted on. So I hear what members are saying, and I'll give that some more considered thought, along with Mark, my colleague Mark at the back of the room. He's working on it with me, Tim and Jill, of course, and we'll come back to you, Councillor Gollop, and take a steer from you on behalf of this committee as well.
Okay, thank you. Because I mean, just to emphasise, I know David and I have had this conversation after a number of the committee meetings we've sat through, and perhaps wrongly, but we consider ourselves relatively informed on issues that are going around and through the committee, and we've ended up not having a clue what decision has just been taken and what the issues were behind the amendments. So if we don't have that, the chances of any other member of the public having a grasp of what's going on is sadly remote. So I think that is important, not just from a governance point of view, but actually in terms of engaging with residents, to make sure that that everybody has an understanding of the decisions that are being taken. Right, I think we're done on that one. Nothing else? No? Okay. Right, so we then move on to item 10, which is the transformation programme, pages 29 to 48. And Rachel, if you... Oh, Jess. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Jess, welcome.
Thank you. Shall I just say a couple of words?
If you just a few words of introduction, and then we'll go on from there.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, folks. I'm Jess Lee, Director of Strategy for the Combined Authority. So this is the regular update on progress on the transformation programme. I don't propose to go into great detail on the background to all of this because we've been over it extensively with the committee over the past year. But just some points to flag from the paper on progress since the last time we met. The Mayors and Leaders session, the scheduled role and purpose facilitated discussion is now in the diary for the 19th of March. So we have the sort of first step towards progressing that element of the transformation programme in place. The regional stakeholder engagement is now getting underway on the refresh of the regional strategy work. The process is getting underway to recruit the final 2 interim posts on the corporate leadership team for the Combined Authority, and a programme of effectiveness and efficiency reviews is now being scoped out, as was agreed at the January committee of the Combined Authority. And the other point to make is that in line with the agreement at the start of this process back in March of last year, we're now in the process of commissioning a 1-year-on review from SOLIS, the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives, to assess progress, which will be starting later in March to report in June. So despite the progress that has been outlined in the paper, there are clearly a number of areas where we haven't been able to make the sort of progress that we would have liked to have seen. Some of that is demonstrated by the External Auditor's report, the Extraordinary Committee in December. And we've also, as the report highlights, not been able to conclude the process of integrating the LEP into the Combined Authority in line with government's timetable. And officers have sought guidance from government on next steps on that front, and we have yet to hear back from them. So the paper has a full breakdown of the actions and progress, and it also in the appendix has the closed actions, the actions that we have taken from the transformation programme now and put into sort of business as usual. So you've got a complete record of where we've got to across the programme. But I think that's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to start the ball rolling? I'm sure someone's got something to say. David, I was hoping you would.
So thank you for that report, Jess. I think we've outlined the issues about the Constitution being key to delivering this transformation programme. So I'm happy to leave the questioning at that unless anybody else wants to bring anything in. Or you'd like to comment on the issues about the constitution?
I think I would defer to Dan on that. I think he's sort of outlined where we are with it.
Yes, unless there's anything specific, Councillor Wilcox, I can help you with. I don't think there's much more I can add to the, what I've said already earlier on in the meeting. That there is a package of works that has gone on in the background. There's some areas of the Constitution that I've identified. Certainly could do with some looking at, in my view. I've been liaising regularly with the monitoring officers at the unitary authorities to seek their view on the sorts of things we can look at. And through a task and finish group starting in the new financial year, I hope we begin to do that in earnest and bring some really positive changes to the main committee meeting, hopefully in the very near future.
Can I just follow up on that, Daniel? Because the Constitution is clear to us, is a hugely complex issue. I guess that's clear to you as well. And you've got a real understanding of the challenges and the problems. Is the timeline such that you are going to be able to deliver what you have identified as the issues in the remainder of your term with the authority? It just seems to me you've got so much knowledge there that it would be a great pity if we don't bring that to a really positive conclusion.
So my contract with the authority ends at the end of July, and I think realistically we are not going to have a new constitution in place by that stage. But what I will leave behind me when I go is a very comprehensive analysis of the Constitution according to Dan Dickinson, for what that's worth to anyone who comes along, and hopefully the team will be well advanced, in the discussions around, because each part of the Constitution has different various options. It's all about how the combined authority wants to do things, and hopefully I'll have left a comprehensive package of measures and work to inform that debate and to get that process off on a really good start. That's already been done in a lot of the areas, but what I'm hoping to be achieved before I go is to have the scrutiny task and finish processes well underway. Looking at that and really advancing that work.
If I can just add to that, I think from the discussions that I've had with Ed in terms of scrutiny, the idea is that we share task and finish groups between audit and scrutiny. So if members have a particular interest in being involved in that process, I think any volunteers would be very gratefully received. What I'm also wondering, Dan, is whether there is the possibility that at some stage in July there could be a briefing for audit committee members from you on where you've got to, because it would be really useful to sort of have that picture of where things are and what is left to be done. And I don't think any of us think this is an easy and quick job. So we fully understand that there will be work in progress still to be completed. But I think it would be really helpful if where you've got to could be shared with members who can help being a catalyst to take it forward from that point.
Yes, Chair, of course. I mean, broadly speaking, there's a couple of different areas. There's some areas where the Constitution doesn't necessarily align with the orders that bring the authority into being, and they should be relatively quick and uncontroversial things to put right. We then move into territory where more debate amongst the members is probably going to be required to decide how the authority wants to approach things like agenda setting and how it conducts its scrutiny, and indeed call-in arrangements. And that might be a longer process. But I'm anticipating the task and finish group work to kick off fairly early on in April. I should imagine that will be a process of convening a task and finish group and appointing members to it. It's a matter for the chair of that group, but I don't see any reason why members of this committee couldn't be involved in that process. And then, logically, the start of that process would be me setting out for those members exactly what you've just asked for. So there's no reason why that piece of work couldn't come to this committee as well. mindful, of course, of the need not to double handle things, and the difficulty that there always seems to be drawing an appropriate distinction between where scrutiny stops and audit starts. But that's certainly something that I anticipate doing in early April. So it will certainly be done before I go. Councillor Gollop, yes.
Yes.
Forgive me if this is rather left field. We sit in an incredibly privileged position and try and represent our residents, thousands of them, as do you. And it can feel, I'm sure, to a lot of people that West of England Consortium is very distant. And I just wonder how we kind of join up the public with what we're all doing and how you're working. You've just mentioned agenda setting. It feels like we're very distant from the public when we're sitting here. And I've been looking at the National Trust as a interesting model of the way that they have various committees that feed back what they do. And I just wonder whether West of England's actually thought about something like that, because it's very easy to forget that, top down, bottom up, there's a gap in the middle. So it's just a comment, really.
I think the very valid points you make, and I think those are some of the things that certainly I've talked about with the chair of scrutiny, and indeed we've talked about with Richard about how we utilise the skills and the advisory boards that exist to actually make the whole process feel more connected and more relevant. So certainly Ed and I, from scrutiny and audit point of view, are very much aware that needs doing. The problem of how to make it happen is back to the challenges I think that Daniel's got with the Constitution, is that it's so big and all embracing that it's very difficult to work out how you break it down. And that relates to the challenge that I feel as a ward member, that there can be a 200-page paper presented to committee, and there might be one paragraph somewhere in there that relates to my ward, and it's very difficult for me to even find that when I know it's there. But if I don't know it's there, there is no chance. So I think that is a wider issue that the combined authority has got to work out how it actually engages and tells the positive story it's got of what it's doing to the people who are benefiting from it. That often doesn't happen at the moment. So I think that is that is something else that needs to go on the to-do list. But my own view is that there are lots of things with the Constitution that have got to be resolved first to make that clearer, because at the moment the Constitution doesn't do anything to address that particular challenge. Do you want to add?
Well, just briefly, Chair, I think you're right. The Constitution is an important part of it, but it's much wider than that in terms of engaging with the public at the right level. It's very rare that you find a member of the public who's keenly aware of and interested in reading the Constitution and getting what they need from there. So it's an important part of it, but it's more of an operational tool for the people in the authority. But I've rewritten constitutions in the last 3 authorities I've been in now, and I like to take an approach where it's set out in a more logical and user-friendly way, using plain English rather than necessarily following the DETR as was model. So that's an important part of it. And I think also an important part of it where we're making a great deal of progress is projecting much further forward with our forward plan of decisions. And those aren't just the statutorily key decisions that you need to publish. It's a range of significant and important decisions that are coming up. So hopefully to give more visibility on the work that the organisation is doing and is in the pipeline. And we're making great strides in those areas as well. So we'll continue to do that as part of the process. But I think you're absolutely right, Chair. It's a much wider piece of work than just getting those key governance documents and processes right. The engagement needs to go much further than that, I think.
Can I just build on that? I think that the other part of the jigsaw for communicating effectively with our residents is about what we're here for, what we're achieving, and you know what the combined authority is all about. And I think that's at the heart of the work that we're trying to do around the refresh of the regional strategy, where when we can reach a sort of where we've got in place a coherent and agreed sort of statement of what we're aiming for as a region that everybody can buy into and we're all supportive of. That's sort of the first step to engaging residents at that level, isn't it? I mean, I think I would say on the specific projects that we're delivering, whether it's, you know, transport projects or whatever, we have quite an effective way of engaging with our residents on, you know, corridors and all the rest of it. But it's that at that higher level, isn't it? It's the in the round that where it's a challenge to get the message right. And I think and also to make it interesting to people because it is quite impenetrable. So I think that regional strategy ought to help us with what it is we're trying to articulate. And then, as Dan says, you know, the constitution and the kind of governance is the kind of mechanisms through which we can make that happen effectively.
Steve, and then Toby.
Thank you, Chair. Jess, the most important thing that's been said in the meeting so far, and probably will be, thank you for that. An awful lot of our residents wonder what the hell this body is for. And the ability to communicate that effectively, as you have just started doing, is really important, because if they don't understand what we're here for, they're going to start wondering what the hell local government is here for at all. And of course, it's much worse than that. Because this authority and the unitaries also engage with subnational bodies. I go to the subnational transport body and with governmental bodies. And the vast majority of the public have no idea of the interactions that we as an authority and our unitaries have with those national bodies. And we seem to make, whilst we communicate quite effectively with the projects that we're delivering, all that other stuff barely gets a mention. I bet I could knock on 100 doors and there might be 2 where I get an answer that talks about the strategic transport arrangements and considerations that are going on at the Western Gateway Subnational Transport Body. People just don't know any of this really important stuff that's going to make real differences. They've got no idea that this stuff is going on, and we're failing dismally to get those messages out there. But thanks for recognizing it and for your enthusiasm that you've just demonstrated for us on the work that we have to do and should do. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Toby.
Thank you. Before I move on to the thing I was going to say, I mean, I agree that we've got more work to promote the authority. To a lot of us, it looks like a transport authority. And its work on skills and on regional development, it is very much secondary. So the communication needs to be across the board. The specific point I wanted to check was, as a governance matter, is the Chief Executive confident that there will be a monitoring officer in place when Daniel's contract expires? And just to say, I'm happy to be a volunteer to to represent this committee on constitutional work, if that's helpful.
So, I mean, there is sufficient time in the process that we're undertaking to recruit both the permanent monitoring officer and the permanent chief executive in the timescale that's been put together. I mean, clearly, you know, there's a lot of external factors about the right applicants and the process people go through, etc. To get there, but there is sufficient time to do so. I can't guarantee there'll be the candidates, unfortunately, in a market that is difficult at the moment. But we'll cross those bridges as we come to them.
Tim.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, there's a lot of talk at the moment about setting up more unitary authorities across the country, especially in the north. And I'm wondering whether there's any sign that the lessons learned with setting up this one in terms of having a different constitution from other unitary authorities that already exist, whether there's any sign that any of that is going to be learned, or whether these new ones are likely to end up all with different kinds of constitutions from each other, and we're going to be even more of a mess as nationally in terms of that. Is there any sign of trying to make sure that all unitary authorities are the same in the way they work going forward? Yeah.
Do you want me to say something about? Oh, sorry, Richard. There certainly seems to be a recognition in government that having bespoke individual deals negotiated between places and government is cumbersome and is difficult for them to manage, as difficult, and it's a difficult model then for people to get their heads around. So certainly the new tranche of combined authorities that are being formed are following the same format from each other. Now, they do have options to opt in or out of various powers and responsibilities, but there is a standard, almost like a menu, that they will be choosing from, which wasn't the case when the first set of combined authorities like ourselves were established. And equally, in thinking about sort of future devolution deals for existing combined authorities, again, there's a sort of menu of options that are open to combined authorities to kind of choose from at the moment. I mean, who knows what will happen if we have a change of government in a future election, but certainly at the moment, there is a recognition of that point, I think, and a sort of standardization of these things.
I want to sort of move things, and Jess, this isn't a question for you because it's outside of your remit. It's probably more a question or a comment for Richard. Because it seems to me that, again, we've got a very positive report on the direction of travel, that the issues within the control of officers are being taken, and that's really positive. My concern is about the role of our leaders, which is why I'm not going to ask you to comment, because I don't think that's fair on you to comment. But is the fact that 15 months or more after the initial Grant Thornton report, we're now told that the leaders are going to allocate a whole hour to working on something so inconsequential as the strategic plan for WACA. And my feeling is actually that is a vital issue, and it highlights that two of the key statutory recommendations from that value for money report are no further forward than they were when the report was issued. And therefore that is something I feel we as a committee need to keep raising with the WACA committee, because it feels to me like a serious failure, and one that isn't in the gift of WACA officers to deliver, because it has to be in the hands of our political leaders. Richard, I don't know whether you want to comment on that. But it's certainly something I feel strongly about, and I think we should be making comments on. But if you can reassure me that it's not as bad as that, then I'd be pleased to hear it.
Yeah, so I mean, your you'll see, because the reports trying to strike that balance of not trying to appear overly optimistic and indeed overly pessimistic, trying to give a factual position in where we think we are, and there has been some good progress on our road to normality, as I usually refer to it as. So look, we do some really good things around what we're trying to achieve. There was an excellent decision on Bristol Temple Quarter and the significance, not just for Bristol, but regionally and nationally in terms of homes, the 10,000 homes development. It is the West of England Combined Authority that have drawn down that money from Homes England, and all the works that you're seeing taking place around the station, around the quantum technology site with Bristol Uni is another area where it's the Combined Authority that have put that 35 million into quantum technology. So the point is well made. People don't necessarily know, and some of that is the confusion that just it exists out there, and our job is to try and make those sorts of things clearer. So the committee have made some really good and big decisions, but that said, there are clearly areas where we would want the progression to be swifter. One of the things that we've did for very good reasons was to ask for that 1 year on review by the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives, and we have engaged a chap called Jim Taylor, who is an independent DLUC Department for Local Communities and Housing inspector in his own right, and is from outside of the regions, therefore nobody knows him, so he gives it that independence and he gives it the credibility, and he puts some fairly robust and important comments into the Solish report. The areas, and we've made a lot of progress in a number of the areas, but the areas we have not made sufficient progress on is around having that role and purpose discussion, the strategy which we have in advanced draft form, and it's being tested back with the unitary authorities and other partners, wider partners in particular. And we had lots of engagement from the universities, the local authorities in particular, the private sector as well, because it's really important that we engage across the board. So the strategy work is an advanced form, and we need to progress and get it out and published. So role and purpose, constitution, the strategy are the areas that we need to push on with at a greater pace. We have engaged and we've got help through government, through the local government association around and our own resources, utilising somebody called Liz McHugh, who is a very experienced ex-chief executive, again from outside the region, from the north west primarily, to help us around some of that role and purpose and relationship issues that we are trying to work on. Really, I mean, my view, and I've been quite clear on this, is that it is not sufficient to have one meeting on role and purpose and getting that strategy work done. That needs to be a series of meetings that take place. That is the view of our professional advisor, Liz McHugh, as well. That you cannot do that in a very short time. So there are areas that we need to push on with, and that requires the sort of collective support and engagement of the committee, and indeed beyond the immediate committee as well.
Thank you, Richard. So, members, I do have a real concern about this, and I've again drafted a note that I would hope you would endorse putting to the committee. I realise time's getting on. I'm not going to read the whole of the note out, but what I've done is I've taken extracts from our discussion in March last year that was submitted to the committee. I've taken extracts from our submission to the committee in January, talking about, amongst other things, no improvements made in relation to SR1 working relationships and SR2 consultation on key proposals. Now, recognise there has been some improvement, because I know that senior officers within the UAs are talking through papers before the meeting, but it doesn't stop the adjournments that you referred to, David. So we've got that. But if I just read the conclusion that I was going to put to that, which is saying it's disappointing to note 15 months on from the VFM report, leaders are now only managing an hour's meeting to discuss key priorities. When officers have put so much effort into this, it's concerning that it appears that the leaders are avoiding the time commitment necessary to finish the work. We welcome the additional Solace input and GT's work on VFM. I say that one option is that we continue to make the same comments every quarter to the Mayoral Combined Authority Committee. Another is that we raise our concerns with officers and external auditors. And I make the point, Audit Committee has no executive authority to instruct, so we can only resort to those options. But we urge the committee to allocate sufficient time, 1, to resolve critical issues that only the committee can deal with, 2, to lead on the issues of the Constitution, where the committee needs to give a clear and agreed direction, and 3, to give sufficient guidance and authority to officers to move these critical issues forward and bring proposals back to the June committee meeting. And I'll circulate the full wording to members, but after the meeting, so that we can agree the exact wording. But are you happy with something along those lines? Thank you. Now, in a way, whilst it's important this goes to the authority meeting, a lot of what I'm saying here is directed at the 3 statutory officers sat here, and to our external auditor, Barry, sat at the end, all of whom have heard me say this probably more than you wish to hear repeated. So in a sense, it's not a new message, but I'm really trying to flag up that Audit Committee can do no more to make this happen. We need help from our auditors to help flag up the importance of dealing with this. And I think if we can just keep putting an agreed statement, and I will emphasise the power of the statement because it is cross-party and cross-authority, is much greater than it would be if any one of us was making the comment as well. So if you're happy, I will refine this along with other statements and link in with Tim and with Rachel, and then we'll circulate it round for any further comments to be made, so that we can hopefully get this tabled in time to be circulated with the committee papers. Barry, do you want? I'm not putting you on the spot to have to say anything, but as I've named you, do you want to do you want to comment?
Always take the opportunity, Chair. Thank you. So, Chair, you'll be aware that we are just about to commence. So the value for money work for 22-23, we reported on the financial sustainability and the improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. We didn't comment on the governance arrangements. Now, we have set out a terms of reference, and that has been shared with officers and with the leaders, and that work is commencing at the moment. So we will be bringing back a report, and that will cover both the prior recommendations around governance and also look at other emerging issues in the intervening period. So that will come back to the Audit Committee in due course.
Okay, thank you, Barry. So I am proposing that we note that item and we make the comments as outlined, plus the others that Tim's made a note of. So I suggest, yes, thank you, that we move on to item 11, Health and Safety Improvement Plan. Yeah. to right. So Bob, I think you're going to briefly introduce this and take
Yes,
any
Chair.
questions. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for your time today. I'm Bob O'Brien, and I'm here to provide Audit Committee members with an update on the work we've been doing to improve health and safety across the whole organisation. This follows an independent review of our health and safety processes last year that found that the health and safety arrangements needed to change to meet the needs of the growing authority. The review made recommendations for improvements and concluded that through the direction of current leadership, there is sufficient focus and desire to drive continued improvement, raise health and safety standards, and build the necessary management arrangements to support the safe and successful delivery of current and future activities. We've used this to develop a health and safety improvement plan for the whole organisation and are on track to deliver against all P1 actions by the end of March, in line with the report recommendations. Further detail is included in the report, but key achievements to date are that we've recruited a head of health and safety who'll be joining us in April. We've set up a new health and safety one-stop shop on our intranet where staff can find all of our updates, guidance and resources. And we've developed a new health and safety policy statement, strategy and management arrangements. Section 11 of the report describes our approach to the health and safety management system, which is supportive of a well-recognised plan, do, check, act approach. And our new health and safety strategy focuses on 5 key themes: effective management systems, so having the right systems and processes in place to help manage our risks; training and competency to ensure we have effective training guidance and supported by appropriate health and safety expertise; positive culture and safe behaviours to make sure that we create and promote the right culture for health and safety and working practice; and clear communication and engagement. Together, these 5 themes help us deliver against our goals of zero harm and embedding excellent health and safety practice in everything we do, so that it's more than just compliance. Thank you for your time today. Happy to take any questions.
David.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Bob, for your presentation. A question about the scope of health and safety within the West of England Combined Authority. Do you primarily deal with health and safety in the office environment, or are you looking to deliver health and safety good practice for, say, site visits to infrastructure builds and things like that? Or so how do you do it?
Yes, so this review is covering both of those things. So it's about workplace health and safety, and as we've increasingly moved to more delivery in the region, it's also about CDM and construction health and safety.
So you used a TLA there. Can you explain what the CDM stands for?
Construction design and materials. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ben.
Thank you, Chair. My questions focus on the appendix, sort of pages 60, 61, 62. Whilst obviously, 62. And whilst obviously recognising that a lot of effort's been made, I think the bit which just concerns me is the P2 and P3 timelines. On some of those ones, when we read some of what the risks are or what the shortfallings are in the health and safety, I think my concerns are actually, are we moving quick enough? You know, whilst recognising this came out in September last year, we have a new recruitment which is not going to take effect till April. A lot of the other work hangs off that particular individual coming into post. And, you know, it's particularly concerning when you read things like the Combined Authority does not have a clear process that demonstrates compliance with the requirement of the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999. And we put that to P2, which delivery date 12 months, 30th of September. And then obviously you're feeding on from that. There's other things which are not going to be in place until the 31st of March 2025. I'm just concerned that there's, you know, whilst recognising things take place to put in motion, even simple recording of instances or tracking which would be a sort of a simple step, if you like, is just not being progressed quickly enough.
And understood. I can. There's a number of actions that were P2 that have been brought forward, and there's some kind of tactical steps that have been taken ahead of the new policy statement, strategy, and management arrangements that kind of sit underneath the strategy. Every month, referenced in the report, every month I take an update through governance board, and some of the key things around. Well, we don't have the dashboard that's identified in that report. We do have some key data around incidents, and we're using existing processes to report on those incidents at the governance board. And on the one-stop shop that I referenced for the intranet, so we brought forward the comms plan and engagement plan. We've got a mix of existing practice and new practice as it's rolling out. So those things are covered in terms of individuals reporting incidents. And then as the combined authority moves into work in the region, we've also got expertise in post supporting particularly the infrastructure teams around the CDM work that I referred to the health and safety out on site, and they're putting in place processes and procedures that complement and support the wider work that I've talked about in this report.
And just to add something briefly on that, we were also very conscious that actually a lot of work was hanging off of the recruitment of a head of health and safety, as you identify, Councillor. So we did also commission the company that did the review. We commissioned them to take forward alongside us some of those immediate actions, so that we weren't in effect waiting for the head of health and safety to start. We're also bringing forward some of the actions as Bob's described, and things like the training and learning and the comms plan, and making sure that everyone understands their individual responsibilities. So I think I suppose what I'm saying in short is absolutely acknowledge what you're saying, and hopefully that's to an extent reflected in the paper, but certainly reflected in our actions going forward.
Thank you for that. There's just one quick follow-up. Also, just recognising there's a lot of pressure being placed on IT services in terms of for the various other improvement plan scopes of work, in terms of data recovery and resilience and all those aspects which we've looked at in other grant launch reports, obviously being falling short. Are you confident that you've got enough resource within the IT elements to actually implement some of these? Because quite a lot of this relies on some form of reporting tools or other IT developments to actually record, monitor and track those. Do you feel confident you have that support in place, enough capacity within the team to be able to to implement those things which we're looking at in this report?
Yes, in short, yes.
Can I just follow on with a sort of follow-up question on the whole issue of health and safety? Clearly, we have to be happy that we have the right processes in place in our office, but I'm guessing that the contracts that we've got are potentially a much higher risk. Potentially. Now, we've already had reports on the finance side in the past of some difficulty getting constituent local authorities to put their bills in and their costs in on a timely basis, which has baffled me to the extent that I'd expect that to be part of a contractual process. If we're struggling to get timesheets and bills in, how are we managing to get confidence that health and safety, that the responsibility is clear? And it never becomes an issue when there isn't a health and safety problem. But the moment there is a problem on one of those sites, is it clear who is, whether WECA or the underlying unitary authority are responsible? Is that accountability clear? And have we got that management in place to avoid the risk happening in the first place? The reputational damage from one incident could be very serious. So are we happy we've got those controls, and in each case it's clear who is going to be responsible?
And so yes, I'm happy that they're addressed in the in the improvement plan, and some good progress is being made against these, but they're not all in place at the moment. So the draft management arrangements consider workplace health and safety as well as the wider health and safety in the region, and the subsequent sets of procedures which are on draft at the moment tailor those processes depending on the arrangements in place. So whether we're the delivery lead or whether we're just awarding funding, all of the different permutations of how that work can be delivered will be set out in those procedures depending on the arrangements in place.
So I think for me, the follow-up question, and I'm not now looking at our forward plan, but it would seem to me, let me put you, when would be an appropriate time for you to give us an update that gives long enough for you to have taken this further, but not so long that if you haven't taken it as far as you should, we're able to ask you questions. What would be a realistic time frame for us to be slotting that in to a work programme?
I mean, I think, yeah, looking at this, we were looking at P2 delivery by the 30th of September. So perhaps if we had a suggestion, Chair, might be that we have an update in advance of the 30th of September, whatever the closest committee is to that. And then similarly, for the P3 actions, where we had 31st of March, perhaps a further update to Audit Committee in advance of that. So perhaps the summer, and then perhaps early 2025 as a secondary, if that would work.
Okay, and does the health and safety report go to the mayoral combined authority, to the committee?
It doesn't at present, though. We'd be happy to take it there if that would be a recommendation of the committee.
I'm looking to officers, but my inclination is that this is sufficiently important, but also there's sufficient expertise needed that we wouldn't necessarily have the ability to know whether what you're telling us is right or not, but actually that it's really important that it goes to the leadership to actually recognise the importance of the issue. I mean, just yeah. Rachel, please.
Yeah, perhaps once we've got that detail on the boundaries of the responsibilities, I think that might be the right time to decide where it should be in terms of oversight, because we have, to some extent, there is a devolved responsibility here on health and safety as well, in the sense of if we are grant funding, then the responsibility for health and safety may sit within the organisation to which we fund and within their own chain of command, versus projects and programmes for which we are directly responsible. We also have dedicated health and safety resource in our infrastructure team who are, again, much closer to the projects and programmes. So I think once we've got that information in line with Alex's timeline there, I think then we can consider the totality of the responsibility for the combined authority and therefore the best forum for it to be held accountable to him.
So yeah, I mean, look, the answer to your narrow question is yes. It needs to go to the main committee, doesn't it? And I think we should take the report there. I think for the June committee would be good, wouldn't it? Because then we've had there've been Bristol elections. We've got potentially got some new members. Definitely got a new lead, obviously, because of the changes that are taking place in Bristol. And that would be a good time to take the report there. It's also helpfully will be part of the audit committee's update to the main committee as well, for them to give a view on progress made, and are we doing things in the right way from that sort of angle that the audit committee ought to look at. But look, I can't underline the importance of this enough to us, really. This is a part of that sort of road to doing things at road to normality that we talked about how do you get things into the right space. That we have our policy document updated. You're meant to be updating that every year. It was somewhat out of date, shall I say, when on arrival here. That's been put right. The good work of Alex and Bob to put in place some of those things, because that is the first question the HSE will ask you when they walk through the door. If you have an accident, can you show me your policy? Showing the one that is out of date is not the space you want to be in. And that's why it's so important for us, really. The pace point that's made really good. We should keep pushing on. Lack of resources is no excuse to the HSE. If they walk in, you have a problem. So we will allocate whatever resources we need to get the pace faster. Hence the reason why we're using the external help to do it as well, because organisations, it's a tight labour market, as we know. Specialists in health and safety, are hard to recruit to. One of many posts that are hard to recruit to. Hence the reason why we're using the external help, as well as pushing on with the recruitment. There is already a post in the infrastructure director that's been mentioned, but lack of resources is not an excuse if we come under review, and that's why we're using that external help. The key thing for us as we do more work externally, and we are growing as an organisation, we talked about the 540 million David talked about for the city regional sustainable transport system. There's also there are much bigger schemes than that. 10,000 homes in Bristol Temple Quarter is the joint second largest development in the country today. That is how significant, and that's why it's regionally and nationally significant. And transferring that accountability and that responsibility is really important, particularly to myself and the main committee, given we are the ones charged ultimately with making sure that those things help. But we need to. I come from an organisation where, unfortunately, in Homes of England, where we looked after all the housing land, but also all government surplus land that was transferred over, you would have 2 to 3 deaths a year. Hence the reason why it's so important. God forbid that we should have anything serious to deal with. But the main committee need to be engaged, both through a report from the audit committee to help in that respect, but actually they ought to be taking a look themselves. We take a report quarterly at our main corporate leadership team. That again is more normal practice, and through the governance board, which Dan Dickinson to my left chairs, again looks at it more frequently. This is about increasing the pace and getting ourselves to the safe space that we need to be in as an organisation.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you both for your report. I think that if we leave it to Rachel or Solange to liaise with you on exact timing, but the only thing I would add, I think, is, I'll come to you, Tim. Can you, apart from reporting to the dates that are agreed, can we establish that you will notify us at any meeting if you believe you are behind time in complying? And I'm putting that onus on you, but I think this is sufficiently important that if it's going adrift, as Richard's mentioned, through lack of resources or whatever, we need you to have a mechanism whereby you can raise that with us so that we can then have a discussion on how to proceed. Tim, and I'm not to make you shorter in what you have to say, Tim, but I'm aware that time is getting on, but I've given priority to these because they seem to me to be really important issues. So,
yeah,
Tim.
this is a very minor point, and it's just about health and safety in general. I'm actually finding it really cold in this room, and I don't know whether everybody else is feeling that, but it's taking away my ability to concentrate on this meeting, to be honest. And I was just wondering if the building in general is as cold, and whether your employees are actually having to suffer in the same way.
So I laugh only because it is a perennial issue. Sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold. But you're absolutely right. Down here this morning it's very cold. We'll see what we can do about it.
Right. So just to check, members, happy that we note the findings and progress made to date, note the governance arrangements, note that, and add to that, noting that the report will go to the full committee and that we will get an update at a date to be agreed, with any shortfall in delivery being reported to us at the intervening meetings. Everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay. Now, thank you both. Now we'll go on to item 12, which is risk management framework, and that's Abby and Pete. Members, if I can ask that we do try and keep our comments as quick as we can on these issues so that we can pick up a bit of time. Okay, so brief introduction, please, Abby.
Absolutely, thank you. So we're presenting two reports on risk today, the first of which is the risk management framework. The framework sets out the overall process and activities that the MCA will use to identify and manage risk, together with roles and responsibilities for employees. Members here at the last committee expressed a desire to help shape the framework and review the effectiveness of the proposed controls and processes. So the roles and responsibilities are set out in section 24 of the framework, and the audit committee's role is to provide independent assurance of the risk management framework. Excuse me. So there's been a lot of work on the framework since the last issue. We've revised it internally with corporate leadership team, with governance board, and the framework now includes newly agreed categories. We've got the addition of innovation and development with a focus on opportunities as well as threats. There's heightened guidance on sovereign, new escalation methodology, and we've enhanced the assurance process itself with the 3 lines of defence model to provide active scrutiny and challenge. There's a newly proposed implementation plan. So the latter sets out the stages of agreeing the approach to risk management through awareness and communications to help embed the framework through workshops and training right up to the next annual review of the framework itself. So the biggest change is the introduction of the risk appetites and the guidance, which is in Appendix 1, Section 17 to 32. And those statements have been developed as an expression of the type and amount of risk that the MCA is prepared to take. So what we hope is it will promote risk-informed decision-making aligned with our strategic aims and support robust corporate governance by setting clear risk-taking boundaries. So what we're proposing is the risk statements ultimately agreed by the Mayoral Combined Authority Committee in June, but we're looking from comments from members to finalise a framework and particularly the new risk appetite statements prior to it going through to committee.
Yeah, we're just having a discussion on whether this is something we might ask members to feedback after the meeting rather than discuss now, because it's something we could get into quite a lot of detail on if members are happy with that. My only overall comment looking at this is it's quite complicated, or it seemed quite complicated. And that can sometimes be a challenge in implementing. But if anybody's got any burning points they want to make, but otherwise I suggest that we email in comments to Tim for perhaps David and I to then look through and consolidate. But Tim.
Well, yeah, I did have one question, which I don't know whether it would come over very well in written format. I'm just, the risk appetites of green, we've got them as green, amber and red, but that kind of makes a suggestion that very high risk appetite is good and low risk appetite is red. Is it that simple, or are those colours sort of leading us to believe that one is better than the other when actually, it's a much more complex decision-making process than that?
So there's a detailed rating and there's more guidance within the document. So black would be averse in that we would not want to participate in this risk, or we would need to analyse it and look at it with committee and take mitigated decisions on it. But it's unlikely that we would continue with that action. But right up to the other levels of higher level risk, going through that sort of amber through to red, depending on what it is. And there's nuances in all of them, so it's never a straightforward. There's a high level rating, but it's hopefully supposed to be a steer for us to be able to take a what are our risk boundaries, but it goes through to that, and it should also fit with our tolerance rating, the 5x5 system, which is again the red, amber, green rating.
So I think the simple answer to your question is no, it's not as simple as that. It depends what you're looking at, doesn't it? So in my view, in the health and just as an example, in the health and safety side, you'd expect us to be very adverse to risk, want to be in that red territory more than taking risks. So in that case, red in my view, and therefore I would imagine most of the committee's view, and hopefully the main committee would be red is a good place to be in respect of that. If I take something else, so we've delivered one railway station. It's the first one for over 100 years. We've got another 6 to do. One of the big ones of those is the work around Portishead into Bristol Temple Meads. Being a huge piece of work. If we were adverse in that space, I suspect we wouldn't deliver it, as it hasn't been delivered for the last 3 or 4 decades. I think for those of you who lived here long enough, we have to take a slightly higher risk appetite around some of that, not on the health and safety aspect, but frankly, you don't build railway stations if you're risk averse, and that one's a significant investment somewhere in the region of 150 to sort of north of 150 million. That's if we were risk averse on that, we'd never do it. So we are moving up the territory. In that answer, it's a good space to be for that particular project. So the colour depends on what you're looking at and what your appetite is, as opposed to it being a simple answer.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of seems a bit counterintuitive to me that sometimes red can be good and sometimes green can be bad. And I didn't know whether there was whether that's the best way to do it.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, just leading on from that, I'm just interested to know the division between the political appetite for risk and how that would be affected and updated and reflected in these, and how that relates to the organisation as a whole, if you like. So, taking the point which you just made there may be a political appetite to take some more risks in terms of opening up more train lines, and how will that flow down? And will that, for instance, when a new mayor potentially comes into office, will that be updated to reflect a greater appetite in certain areas? And are there the checks and balances in place when the organisation that's going, no, well, wait a minute, you're going too far here. That's really too risky for what we think is reasonable for authority of this type.
I'll take that if it's helpful. So look, the key thing on the way this works, and it should work in all organisations, whether you're private or with public sector organisations, is that the management team of the organisation need to understand whether they are operating within the risk appetite of the organisation, and that risk appetite in our case needs to be set by the main committee. So the check and balance around it not being one individual is that it would go to the committee to set the risk appetite. So there would be a number of heads thinking around what that risk appetite to be. But that's the committee's job. It should tell us what the risk appetite is within the organisation, as a private sector board would tell its executive team what the risk appetite was that board were prepared to take on behalf of their shareholders. So that's how it works. The issue here is that they haven't had a risk appetite statement. That is why we're trying to put that in place. So in other words, the executive don't really quite know whether or not, executive in the management team don't really quite know whether they're operating with the risk appetite, and that's being done on a sort of individual committee reports basis, really. So it's really just putting in place that proper framework. The other benefit we have here, as many alls do, is we test these things through the Audit Risk Committee because the importance of the Audit and Risk Committee's view into the committee to consider their views and take it again. It gives it that sort of broader set of heads and thinking around what feeds into that main committee. So that's what this is about. And the other key point for me is getting it into the DNA of our thinking. So that risk management is not a dull and subject. People, managing our risk should be in our sort of daily thinking, and that doesn't mean that we would want to be risk adverse on everything we do, but we should certainly be very risk aware so that we're managing those things in a much better way.
I really liked this paper. I thought it was analytical, well structured. It showed where risks had to be taken, and I'm happy that this committee should recommend to the Combined Authority Committee that it adopts a risk framework for the reasons that Richard set out.
You're making that point, Toby. I had a couple of caveats which I'll just mention. One was the feeling that I felt there should be more mention of key performance indicators as a way of measuring whether we were achieving what we were wanting to achieve, and therefore proving that we were minimising the risk. The other point was that, and I haven't got the page number now, but in the talking about the third line of defence, external audit and independent scrutiny were put in as a third line of defence. And I don't know whether that's sort of industry practice. I know we expect great things of our external auditors, but actually they're inevitably going to be very late in the process looking as a line of defence from risk, because they're looking after the event has happened, and even internal audit who are more current are going to be limited as to their line of defence. So that was just a plea from me of could you just have a look at that wording, because it didn't feel as though we could expect that line of defence from those services, or indeed from external scrutiny. So I think that just needs a little bit of tweaking. But for me, taking Toby's point, this is codifying and bringing things forward. So it's a great improvement. Rather than prolong this debate now, can I suggest that if members do have any other comments they want to put in, send them to Tim, and we can then relate. Okay, everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay, thank you. So item 13 is the risk registers. Now, unless you have anything really urgent you wish to raise on that, my suggestion, members, is that we simply note this item and move on. David?
Thank you, Joe. Can I make one quick comment? The actual risk register statements themselves is there is no timescale for mitigation. So for any of these things, there's no expectation about when these things might get fixed. And I think that's a really important part of a risk register, is setting some timescales for delivery.
Andrew?
And just another quick thing, in the summary, it gives the score before mitigation and the score after mitigation. But in the individual breakdowns, what I assume are the same figures show as current risk rating and tolerance risk rating. And that's not clear to me whether that tolerance risk rating is actually the rating after mitigations.
It is mitigation rating. We'll change the wording to make it explicit in the next version.
Okay, everybody happy to note that report? Okay, thank you both. We go on to item 14, the Treasury Management Monitoring Report. Now, you will have read in the papers that I was asking for members to submit comments in advance of the meeting. I think, Tim, we've not had any comments.
Nothing came through me. Sorry. Nothing came through me, Chair, no.
So, and given this is something we've looked at in some detail, and there is nothing in this report that is unexpected, I suggest that we note the Treasury Management Report. Everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you. Now, sorry, Rachel, what do you
Internal audit plan.
Yeah, do you suggest we carry on Yep.
Yeah, I was just suggesting that we could take this as a fairly simple item because Tarek and I spoke about this beforehand in terms of it's quite a short item, subject to member comments.
Yep. So Tarek, have you got anything you specifically want to add to this? No? Members, any comments? Toby?
Yes. Sorry I didn't put this in advance, but I was away last week. In areas for review, there's a looking at Westlink, and that's definitely supported. But my authority is worried about West Local as well. That's the local transport option. There seems to have been a level of secrecy and non-communication with authorities. Indeed, there was some suggestion that officers may have been told not to communicate with officers, but with unitary authority officers, because the, discussions were being taken with one of our parish councils. And we would certainly like to see an audit review of the processes underlying West Local and the cooperation with unitary authorities as well as the parish councils, and to make sure that political factors haven't been given too high a weight in that.
Yeah, so just to pick up on that, so we'll have a look at how that might fit with the audit plan and advise. Just to clarify, the conversation that Tarek and I had just before we started was just to say this is presenting the next year's audit plan. Most of the items that are in here are quite essential in terms of the fundamental systems that Tarek needs to review in order to ensure completeness of the programme. Although if there are additional pieces of work that we need to undertake or that are requested or required throughout the year, then we will endeavour to undertake those. I don't know, Tarek, if you just want to comment on your plan in that respect.
Yeah, so the plan itself, it is a flexible plan. So depending on what happens through the year, things can be taken out and put back in. New things can be added to that. And like Rachel said, that if something is very urgent, we can add that to the plan, subject to like days being available.
Oh, yeah, Jennifer.
Thanks. In looking at the plan, I guess my question is, have you worked to align the audits in the plan to the work that's been done around the risk framework and the risk registers? Is there an alignment between the internal audits that we've proposed and the strategic or the corporate level risks?
Yes, there is. I mean, like as part of our planning process, we do look at risk registers. We also look at the MTFs. So we do quite a comprehensive review of the areas. And then we also obviously the thing with the risk registers is that they're never as up to date as perhaps their director's knowledge. So what we do is we start with the risk registers, and then we have those conversations with the directors and other key officers to ensure that we are actually identifying the greatest risk areas.
Yeah, also just to add to that, so the risk framework that you've got here today is a new piece of work, so that's quite new to Audit Committee. So as we embed that new way of working on risk and our new consideration of it, undoubtedly there will be things that fall out of that may require work undertaken by internal audit that we're not currently aware of. It's all part of our work towards strengthening our governance processes.
Okay, anything else for our members happy to note the audit plan? Yeah, okay, thank you. And then we move on to item 16, which is the Interim Audit Committee Annual Report. So Tariq, over to you again. Or I can actually do this because actually members we David and I were involved in talking this through. We've circulated the report to members. The idea being that we have a report prepared by this committee, agreed by this committee, and available to submit to the main committee at their June meeting. I don't think at the time when I suggested this, I realised that Solange has got about as much work to do again after today's meeting to add in all the things that we've now covered. So that will be amended. So again, Solange will draft, and David and I will look at before it's circulated to everybody for agreement. So that agreement will happen in this civic year before the elections take place, so that the report is ready to submit. We went through, and committee members have looked at the standard self-assessment process. Yeah. We've identified the direction of travel, but identified areas that need improvement, which is behind the action plan that we've produced, so that we can keep that momentum going. So again, members, if you've got any questions or comments, but you will be seeing a final draft of this when it's updated. So are you happy to note what we've got? Okay, thank you. So that takes us to item 17, which is the birthday bus fares scheme. So this is pages 161 to 180 of your papers. So Bob, Phil, which of you's going to lead on this? Okay, righty-ho. Thank you, Phil. Oh, yeah.
A quick run through. So this the birthday bus offer, which is part of the wider bus service improvement plan programme. It's important to remember the bus service improvement plan programme was our response to the national bus strategy, which central government announced in April 21. And we developed a bid, which went to joint committee for approval in October 21. We submitted that bid. We were successful, but as ever, we didn't get as much money for everything we wanted. So we had to do some refinement of that. That went back to committee in July 22, where we accepted the bid, and delegations were given to 3 directors, two of which were in the Combined Authority, our Director of Infrastructure and Director of Resources, and also the North Somerset equivalent of the Director of Infrastructure, because it's a joint programme with North Somerset. Part of that bid was fares offers. One of the core things we were trying to achieve with the bid, which really came out of the national bus strategy, was growing patronage after COVID, strengthening the core commercial network. So we went through a piece of work to identify which fares offers would be the best value for money. And one of those was specific fares offers focused on short time frame, getting people to try the bus out, getting them onto the bus, and then embedding that usage so that it grows that patronage levels. So we did a piece of work with KPMG, who identified a whole raft of offers, one of which was the birthday bus offer. And we went through a process of developing that, consulting with our highway authority colleagues. And then we had to ultimately get approval from Department for Transport for that through a mechanism called the Project Adjustment Request. So that was submitted last summer to Department for Transport. They approved it, subject to we had to deliver monthly reports which showed the progress, what the uptake was like, and also we have to do a closure report to show what the benefits of that have been. So we're due to end at the end of July, so we will be doing a closure report late summer to show the benefits of it. And we've adjusted one thing I think to be clear on for this. When we costed this, and the figure that went into the public domain was very much based on our estimates. We don't have a track record nationally for these types of offers, so it was quite difficult to estimate exactly what the uptake of those offers would be. So we did an estimate based on the existing bus users plus an uplift of 12%, which gave us never quite sure what to call it, a best or worst case scenario. Best case scenario probably, but we were very clear that that was unlikely to hit that. But so we've re-estimated as we go, reforecasting as we go. We're looking at about £3 million. We think that cost is going to be. And one of the things we've looked at rolling that into is a further fares package, which is really targeted at getting patronage growth in certain services and certain corridors. So we're working through the detail of that at the moment. But the initial data is showing really good uptake. We've got about 50,000 users to date. What we're now 7 months into this. They've had a total of nearly 600,000 journeys across the network. So people are using this, people are using it and embedding themselves into it. Some of the data we're starting to get back, and as you appreciate, it's an ongoing basis. We're getting this data. About 17% of people said that they're more likely to continue to use the bus afterwards. We do a follow-up survey immediately after your month's ended. My month's just ended. I've got my follow-up survey in my inbox to do. We also do a 6-month afterwards survey to show what their embedded usages look like long term. We issued the first 6-month one out in February, so we'll be starting to go through that data to look at more detail about what that will be. That's where we are at the moment, I think. I'm not sure there's a lot else I can add, so I have to take some questions.
Yep, Andrew, David, Tony.
Thank you. Can I ask some questions about the level? You mentioned there some figures about the level of uptake. Can I ask some questions about the level of uptake of survey response invitations? So basically how many responses is the data that we've got based on?
I don't have that information directly to hand, actually. One of my colleagues at the back of the room, we may have that information to hand. Ejaz, do you know that off the top of your head? Sorry.
Hiya, I'm Ejaz. I'm the project manager for fares and ticketing for the BSIP. Obviously, one of those projects one of the outputs that we're doing is the birthday offer, and you've asked a question. On the survey uptake, as of the end of January, there was 4,075 responses. There's no encouragement to do the surveys as well. So we're actually really quite proud of the uptake, because normally to fill in a lot of surveys and to get good response on surveys, you have to offer some incentive. So we hope that it looks like the month of free travel has been enough to get people to fill in the response. And now we're currently monitoring the long-term survey. We're still getting responses back from that for those who had their birthdays in August. And we're hoping that the people will reciprocate that and continue to respond to our surveys.
Can I do a follow-up, Jeff? So thank you for that. Are you looking at other potential sources of data? For example, are you able to identify where journeys made using the passes begin and end? Because I'm conscious that the return information suggests that the bulk of survey responses are from the least deprived areas, and I'm wondering if that's whether we're able to tell more about where the journeys are actually taking place from other sources.
So with the birthday offer being delivered through a smart card, we're able to understand where people are essentially tapping on with using the smart card, what bus service they're using, and then generally from the bus service, roughly which direction of travel they're heading to. So yes, we can roughly know where people are taking the trips, especially on kind of the top 10 trips. We kind of monitor the top 10 routes that are being used using the pass, which gets updated on a monthly basis if anyone is interested in that information. Yeah, so yeah, we are looking at that.
Yeah, one of the benefits obviously is we get that information, which is actually gold dust to us to understand where people are making journeys and where bus routes will be. One of the things we're looking at as a side to this is looking at the wider bus network and what that should look like for the next 20 years. And so this is going to form the basis of some of that information. So it's really important.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some question, a couple of questions. One about the timeline of the announcements for the birthday bus scheme. All the announcements seem to happen at the end of May 2023 about how the scheme would be working, but the unitary authorities don't seem to be told till the 14th of June. What's the rationale for that, please?
The unitary authorities were informed initially at the end of April. We had a workshop with officers where we went through the wider BSIP programme, and this included the birthday offer. And the formal announcements were very much made in the summer of 2023.
Thank you for expanding on that confusion. Also, so we've allocated initially £8.9 million for the birthday bus offer, yet we've only spent £3 million. What's going to happen to the rest of the money, please?
Two things that we're looking at doing. One, as I said earlier, we're rolling this into a fares package 3, we call it. We've got 3 fares packages. The first one is the £2 offer, which we were jumped ahead of national government with that. Second one is the birthday offer, and the third one is we're looking at a variety of offers, which really focused about specific services and how do we get people onto specific services and get them to grow the patronage on those services, especially ones where we rely on public money. How can we strengthen them so we can reduce the public funding required for those services? The other option we're looking at, and this is something that the government have given us an opportunity to do, is to extend bus services for another year post the end of the programme in 25. That came after we made this announcement. It was September when that was announced. So that's given us an opportunity to basically spend the money in that way by looking at extending those services for another year to give us what we've intended those services to be was become commercially viable. For where we think we might not make them commercially viable by 25, it gives us an opportunity to look at extending for a further year to create that commercial viability of them.
Toby and then Tim.
Thank you. I'm looking at the table on page 179, which shows the indices of multiple deprivation levels. And it's unfortunate the biggest take up is in the richest areas. Now, is that normalised for the west of England's multiple deprivation indices, or is it the national? Because obviously we've got more, we're probably a richer area than some.
Yeah.
So I think some more analysis about using this as a proxy for class would be helpful in any further responses.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So at the moment, it's at a national level, and that is something that we're definitely looking into. Like you said, it could be that the West is just more affluent than other areas nationally. So we need to look at that, and we need to see, what it looks like at our regional level in terms of deprivation, and that's something that we're looking to take away from all this and work out if we can get better understand that, because obviously using local regional data is a lot more reflective of when you're looking at statistics. Yeah.
Tim?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I've just got a question on, I wonder whether you are able to do a comparison between which is more effective, the sort of lowering of the fares to £2 across the board, as opposed to the sort of targeting an offer at one section per month kind of thing. Have you got any indication so far of which gets more people onto buses?
we haven't done that piece of work in detail yet. We did a value for money assessment last summer, which was by necessity quite a rapid piece of work. I'm very keen to revisit that, to look at some of those nuances like that about which offers are better value for money than others. We did do a very high level report, as I said at the start of the presentation, with KPMG, who identified a variety of different options that we could consider. And this came out as one of the better options, the birthday bus one, just a short-term intervention rather than looking at embedded. The risk is if we go for something like giving people certain travel for free at certain times, there's a cliff edge to the end of the programme when the funding ends and we have to drop that money, and that's not a good look for any of us, I don't think. So it's about how do we put schemes in place that can give that longevity and essentially grow the commercial network so that we don't have to intervene.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the stats on pages, around pages 164 and 165, are you able to tell whether the scheme is attracting people back to the buses post-COVID? A lot of people know. Some people stopped using the bus because they were worried about infection. So is it attracting people back to the bus, or are we actually seeing new patrons, people who've never used the bus before?
Do you want to answer? I'm happy to. Go on. Yeah, so I think it's really interesting, that question about post-COVID recovery and the bus market. You know, we've been having conversations with operators, and some of them have said that you know, roughly we are at the point at which we've kind of got the people that we need back from post-COVID, but they're just taking fewer trips because obviously it's a different market now than it was before. And so what I would say is, though we're not asking that question directly, we are seeing that the take-up of the offer is mainly being used for, or it's a mixture of both in the question is the highest, but out of pleasure and work, pleasure is the highest. And that's something that we're quite, you know, happy to see, that people are using the bus for more off-peak trips. And as that's what kind of, when we were looking at this offer and the evidence surrounding it, you know, one of the things is, you know, we need to try and increase those off-peak travel trips.
I guess we need to do that because people are working from home now.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah.
People don't need, and that's one of the things, one of the reasons why people might be tempted to use a car if they're only traveling
Absolutely.
to work 2 days
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah, and especially like, you know, it's just so easy to hop in your car, especially if you work from home. Things have become a lot more convenient, and yeah, the reliance on public transport is less. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can I just add, there's quite a wide disparity now with pre-COVID about who is travelling on buses, and the one category of passenger that is markedly down is actually the concessionary pass holders, the elderly people. Across the country, it's around about 70% of pre-COVID, so it's still significantly lagging behind other groups
I'll
of
be
people.
doing something about that shortly.
Yeah, well, me too. Yeah.
Ben, and then Tim, and then Taz.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just in relation to some of the data tracking, which I think we picked up on earlier, and in particular, how it doesn't seem that difficult relatively for someone who's taken up the birthday pass for that particular card to be monitored over 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, which actually, as the months move on, you would start to see the pattern of change, whether it was used 5 times in the first month, once in the second month, and then not at all. And actually, that the value of that data is far better than a questionnaire, because as we all know, if I visit the doctor and he asks me how many units of alcohol I drink a week, I'm going to report something very different to actually the reality which there is there. And I think inherent within the questionnaire is that wanting to please. You've given me something for free for a month. I'm wanting to give you the right answer. So when I fill out this questionnaire, quite often there may be instances someone saying, oh yeah, I'm really going to use the buses because they've been really happy with the fact that they've had some free travel, and actually they may not be planning on using that free travel. And I was just trying to understand how we can unpick and actually make sure we've got the correct data, not just appreciative data, if you like.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
First, which is ultimately the metric we're looking at is that growth of patronage broadly across the region, and that we're feeding into that and we're seeing that growth happen. But Ejaz will do a bit more of a nuance than that.
Yeah, I think you've got a good point. You know, after you give someone free travel, they're likely to give you good survey results, and that's where the long-term survey comes in as well. You know, we ask a lot. We give the opportunity in the long-term survey to ask more, to answer more qualitatively rather than quantitatively. So you know, we can have a broader picture of what people's views are surrounding the free travel. And you're right, one of the major benefits of this offer is the data, and you know, being able to collect that data and understand the transport network post-COVID, where people are traveling, you know, the major services in our region. When you offer someone free travel, where they're going to go, you know, they can go anywhere they want in the region. Where are they going? What bus stops are they getting on? You know, what are the most popular hotspots in terms of bus people getting on buses, and you know, being able to you know, use that data to inform our future strategic decision making.
Just one quick, can I just be clear though, are we capable within the data of saying person A who took up the birthday scheme over a period of 12 months, 2 years, that they've used the bus 15 times? Because otherwise, fine, we may be growing everyone who's using the scheme. We may say granular data shows us that increased bus patronage is increased. But I want to know, is it directly connected with the money that's been spent on this particular scheme, not as a general thing? Because this could have no effect at all, and I would not know that unless I can tell, actually, we can link that particular person. The first time they've used a bus in so many years was on that particular time because of the birthday bus scheme, and over a 2-year period, they've now used it X number of times. So I think for me, that's the most important thing about analysing the effectiveness of one scheme, not the totality overall.
I mean, just to make the point, it is a month scheme, so the card is only used for a month period. So yeah, that's much as I would love to do a 2-year free bus travel scheme, we haven't got the budget available to do that, so we can't get that long-term data. The card is just used by, but go on, just.
Yeah, sorry, I think there's some confusion there in the question, but basically, the fare offer is only running for 12 months. So it gives everybody in the region the chance to have 1 month's free travel during their birthday month.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to think, you know, I think it's inherent in the problem of the scheme and where it's been delivered, in the sense that we've not been looking for the long term, because effectively we want to identify from person one that they've used it and they continue to use it. I understand that, yes, they may pay cash, but I would have thought that the obvious answer would have been perhaps you would have offered a small percentage discount by using a card for future travel. And then that would have, they wouldn't have gone to the cash machine and paid the £2 for whatever the scheme is afterwards. They would have continued to use their card because they would have got a small discount to that scheme. And that data is probably so much more powerful if you'd had it in your hands. Because you issue the card out, you say, okay, the first month you get it for free, but if you continue to use this card, rather than paying the X number for the travel, you get a 10% discount. They're going to use that card, and you can then track them from there to there. And actually, probably the money that should have cost for the survey and the survey results, you would have had that in your hands.
Are you charging a consultancy fee for suggesting how the scheme can be progressed? Because that might be a very interesting scenario. But I'm going to bring you to a close because I've got Tim, Tess, Steve and John, and I wanted to ask some questions as well. So, Tim, go. Tessa. Microphone.
Use these things. Basically, the culture is down on its numbers post-COVID. Is there some way that we could link buses to the offer of culture? Because I'm just thinking of Ashton Vale, as everybody knows, Ashton Vale buses. We've now got 2 instead of having none, which is brilliant. But that group they do go out at night, but which is one of the reasons that.
Sorry, can I just interrupt, because
you've got lots of
people. No, it's a good point, but we're in danger of getting into areas that are more scrutiny than audit, and I'm sure officers will be making notes of the things they can consider if there's some pots of funding available for it. But I think we're better to keep to the
anyway,
topics in
just
point.
The links and the loyalty card might be a medium to use.
Steve, and then, John?
Yeah, I'm interested in your views on the uptake and how attractive people found the birthday bus scheme in those rural villages where there are no buses.
The birthday bus pass, yes, it's delivered on smart card, but on the back of the card, there's a Westlink DRT code that also gives them free travel on DRT during the whole of their birthday month as well. So that's one of the reasons why we hope to address that issue, yeah.
So the comments I wanted to make were really following on from Toby's comment about deprivation. It's really unusual for residents in my ward to get more benefit than, say, residents in David's ward. But at a relatively affluent ward, 2 times the take-up, I think, on average of David's ward. And that, to me, begs the question of what did we set as the performance indicators at the start of the project? Because I don't think that would have been the aim. In fact, I'll go further. I know it would not have been the aim. And that seems that there's so many factors. My ward has 2 major bus routes running through it that are relatively regular, in spite of any problems that the bus service has. So there is more option and more availability. But so to me, we need to identify with any project that we're doing, how are we going to measure success? And linked to that, and this is only anecdotal, but the people I've talked to that have used the birthday bus pass scheme, and I'm surprised how many people I found to talk to because I'm aware of it and interested in it. But most of the ones I know were using it because they got free travel for a month, but they were using a bus anyway. Now, and I think Ben's question about, are people, is there an optimism bias or whatever the equivalent is? And the answer people are giving to surveys. Are they telling us what they think we want to hear? Because quite a number simply thought, hang on, I can get to work without having to pay for a month. So therefore, it was worth them doing. So I believe how we measure anything we undertake has got to be key, and that links into the discussions about risk management as well. If we're measuring, we can see if something's producing unintended consequences. But there would appear to be, and I'm almost jumping the gun a bit to the DRT report as well, but it appears that the more affluent the area, the more people are familiar with and have access to internet, the more they have the ability to make use of the options. And so how do we correct that? By targeting the areas where people most need the buses rather than simply subsidising them, when in the nicest possible way, some of the ones that are being subsidised don't actually need it.
So, Councillor, may I make the point, perhaps, that the ultimate aim of this initiative was modal shift. So it doesn't really matter whether you're affluent or not. It's how many journeys you don't take in your private car. And also, if existing users use the bus more, that's still a good result because it's obviously encouraging modal shift.
Yes, but if it's not producing modal shift, it's simply resulting in people who were paying to use the service using the card to use the service, and we don't actually know how many that is. But so I take your point entirely about modal shift, but we don't actually have that evidence, and that's back to, if the aim is modal shift, then actually the targets we set and the monitoring mechanisms that we put in place at the start should be designed to prove that categorically, so that we then have the evidence that we are getting value for money because we're delivering what we set out to. And that doesn't have to be that I or any of us here actually agree with what you've set as the parameters, but if you set them, we need to be sure that we're delivering them. And I think that, so to me, really, and I think, Rachel, I'd be saying that is a message we need to convey in any project we're planning. How do we make sure, and almost how do we internally prove that we really are getting value for money? And because that's what we ought to be looking for. Are we delivering, or alternatively, is there a better way of achieving a better outcome that could have cost us less? So it's that mechanism that I think we need to put in place. Also, it's a very exciting item because I think that got almost every member contributing. So I said that, and what I would just say to officers is, don't take our comments as not being appreciative of something that's innovative and different, because and there are always risks in doing things that are innovative and different because they produce questions and challenges. And actually, it's really positive in the way it's engaged with members. I think we recognise this is something different, and long may that continue. But it won't stop us from asking questions and suggesting ways that the next time we try it, could we tweak it, modify it, do something in a way that measures it differently, captures the information differently. I presume that the birthday bus fare scheme and the DRT report are things that we've asked for to be brought here and won't actually be going to the committee. So it's only a question of, are there conclusions and issues that ought to be going to the committee? And if the reports aren't going, perhaps we ought to be referring to them in the audit committee report to the committee, because I think they should be aware of the need or concerns about performance indicators and measurements. So can we at least, Tim, put that in the notes to refer to the next committee meeting? Okay, I'm aware we're running out of time fast, so are you happy that we note that report with our comments and move on to the DRT, Westlink Lessons Learnt report, which is item 18, pages 181 to 190.
Do you want me just to give a very brief overview of Westlink to remind? Okay, so Westlink came into operation last April and coincided with the withdrawal of a number of, half of all the supported services in the region. But it wasn't a direct like-for-like replacement, and there's been confusion, quite understandably, I would have thought, with the timing, about what Westlink was designed to do. It was never designed and never can replace withdrawn fixed services in rural areas. It was designed entirely differently for a different purpose, and that was to complement the existing commercial network, which many areas, rural areas, had no connection whatsoever to with the previous supported service network. So it's been unfairly blamed in many ways for something which it could never have delivered in the first place. So that's the first point I'll make. The second point is that we have, through our enhanced partnership, 2 service change windows every year, April and September. To register service changes, you need statutorily to give 70 days notice in advance. And that meant that were we to move faster than this April, where some significant changes have been made, to have met the previous window last September, we would have had to have registered service changes in June. The service had only been operating in April, and it got off to a rocky start. And to be frank, there was no way we could have introduced any changes any earlier than currently, because we weren't in a position to do so. So perhaps I'll pause there.
So I think I'm in danger of commenting along the lines of comments on the previous report in terms of performance indicators. Unless I'm mistaken, the only performance indicator that I could see was that the committee said that it didn't like what it was costing to support subsidised bus services at the most expensive end of the scale. Mm-hmm. And it set a parameter that it didn't want to go above. Now, that is that is clearly one performance indicator, but in isolation, it's not, or in my view, it's not a lot of help, because we need other measurements in place. And there was no indication that I was aware of in terms of measurement of the number of people who used the service, or the distance of journeys used, or a whole variety of other things. So I suppose if I'm looking at lessons learned, the lessons should be that we should be putting much more rigorous measurements in place to see how we are performing. And if those indicators are in place, then if things are not delivering in line with those indicators, that's clear to your team who are managing it that something needs to be considered and probably raised with other officers that there is something not quite delivering as expected. So it worries me that we didn't have any process for that mechanism appeared to be being measured. And yeah, we appreciate the fact that we got to see figures not long after you got to see figures. So therefore we're appreciative of that, but just feel that because there was a problem that had to be solved, and it did a remarkable job between everybody in solving it in that short time frame. But actually, the finer points of setting targets and having things to measure against, other than the very basic financial measurement, was not there, or it wasn't there as far as we've perceived it. So that's very much what I see as a lesson that needs to be learned at the early stages to actually make the role of those managing it easier, because you've got parameters to measure against. Tim.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, I'm wondering, it's been said many times that DRT was not a replacement for existing bus services, but DRT was brought in at the very point that a number of bus services were cut. And the impression I get is that DRT wasn't really ready at that point, and it was rushed in, which gives the impression that it was rushed in to try and fill that gap. You didn't really have enough drivers, the vehicles had to be prepared very quickly. And part of the fallout from that was that the service didn't work in the way it was supposed to, because a lot of people couldn't get the journeys they wanted. and so you kind of had a lot of confidence early on in the service. So do you think it was a mistake to rush DRT in for that April starting point? And what, you know, was that driven by the fact that these other services were being cut, even though one wasn't designed as a replacement for the other?
Well, I wasn't there at the time, so I can't comment. I think perhaps you should, yeah.
I think as far, you have to remember, again, this is under the BSIC programme, so we need to deliver this by 25. So the longer we delayed, as Bob said earlier, if we didn't hit April, we'd have to wait till September for the next service change, which would have left us 18 months. We really wanted to get as long as possible from this to learn the lessons, to see if we can make this model work. So whilst I wouldn't necessarily recommend launching at that speed, there was a very specific reason why we had to do that. And you know, we always knew that we would be learning lessons through this. It's a 2-year service that we will learn lessons from, and we will adjust as we go. And we are adjusting as we go. There's a raft of changes coming in April, and I'm sure there'll be far more changes. So,
can I just follow up on that, because in the report it says there are changes coming in April. When do we get to learn what those changes are?
Well, very shortly, because we've registered them with we are our own licensing authority now. For quite a lot of things have been delegated down from the Traffic Commissioner's office at Leeds. So we would fall foul of our own rules if we didn't register the service changes in advance. There are changes to zones. There are also changes to what you can do. It's called anti-cannibalisation, but it basically means if an alternative bus service exists already, then you have to take that rather than take a whole journey from A to B on the minibus. There are also some improvements to through ticketing arrangements, which currently there aren't. Now we're just about to announce all of these things, hopefully in good time for the press, for the users to understand, and to encourage more ridership, of course.
Okay. You made a bit of a slip of the tongue there, which is what I was actually going to say, is that the recent bus changes that first have announced, I learned about them on the same day as the press, through the press rather than through WECA. It would be really helpful if, as local councillors, we could learn about those changes in advance of them being in the press. So that would be a plea that I would make, because we talk to our residents regularly about our conversations with WECA and how we're trying to help improve things, and then to suddenly find out about something when you read about it in the press does make it awkward.
Yeah. So I personal view on Westlink is it's innovative. It across the country, it's one of the biggest schemes. Most of them are much smaller than the ones which we embarked upon. Certainly lessons learned, and it's work in progress. And I accept that it's not just about a trajectory to get down to the minimum level of subsidy possible for the taxpayer, but ultimately we do have to get the cost down quite considerably by the time the scheme ends, and that has to be the ultimate objective. Otherwise, we would rightly be criticised for the costs to the public purse. But it's getting better. Have to remember, we launched it at the very worst possible time. I'm not talking about the short timescale for implementation. I have a career background in bus operations, and it was quite ambitious to launch it in 3 months, let's just say. But the truth is, there's a national shortage of bus drivers, a very acute problem, which still is actually an issue. And to try and launch it, at such a time when First Bus, the principal operator in the region, had 250 agency drivers, was obviously quite challenging. And the service has improved quite considerably and is now vastly more reliable than it was when we launched it in April, which is encouraging.
Richard.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, look, it's to do it in such a short time scale was incredibly difficult, wasn't it? But you've also got to sort of recognise that the mayor and the committee who made that decision to give that challenge to the officers to operate in a short time was done. I think with for the right reasons, that we knew that there were nearly 30 supported bus services being stopped, and I get why. From a value for money perspective, they were difficult, and local authorities have got to make really difficult decisions around where they allocate their funding, and therefore where they don't, given the the challenges in public sector funding, particularly for local authorities. So I get why they had to they in effect made a decision to flat cash the money that we were given in 23-24. That decision's also been necessary for 24-25 in balancing the broader budgets, but at a time when inflation was operating at sort of north of 40% last year in bus services inflation because of the cost of diesel, the cost of drivers, and other inflationary factors. It was way above the average figure, and is still higher today. That meant we've had to use reserves across that funding just to bring a broader point, to bring it into balance this year, so that we didn't have to reduce down the amount of supported services, the amount of services that we were able to provide as part of that money for the fund covers all of the concessionary fares costs. It covers all of the supported services costs as well, and a number of other factors, but they're the two big numbers that exist within it. Next year, and this is the flag we gave in the budget report that went to the January committee, is that we will probably be looking at an increase in order to maintain the level we've got, because the reserves in the specific pot of the levy will have run out. We're probably looking to increase somewhere in the region of about 13-15%. So we've got an issue that we're building up by going with flat cash zero. I get why, I understand why. Real difficult times, but we do have an issue on buses that is going to come to us next when we set the budget for the next financial year. I would say the mayor and the committee wanted to put something else in place, hence the reason they gave us the challenge. Did we want to do it from, I think it was a November committee decision made, and have it launched in April? You wouldn't necessarily want to do that, is the absolute straight answer, but we bust the gut to do so. We actually got the operator license the Friday night at 5:30 before we launched the service on a Monday. That is tighter than anyone would want to get their operating license, I would suggest, bearing in mind the Transport Commissioner doesn't work at the weekends. So it was really tight. But it is in effect a group Uber service. It is relatively cost effective. It is £2 for adults, £1 for children. It is not to replace the supported bus services that unfortunately had to be reduced down. It is not to replace a taxi cab service either. If there are a dozen people on it, it is not going from A to B. So if you're relying on it to be to think your journey is going to be a little bit more than your car journey, it isn't, because it's not meant to replace the Uber service either. Hence the reason it's so cost effective, but that has had an impact on usage. The review paper will come to our management team as well, en route to committee, about how do we make something better that we've got, because the alternative is we stop it, and then those rural areas that are so important to not just from a bus usage point, but health perspective as well, getting people out more, an economics perspective, getting people to the place where they will spend their money. It's much broader than just this narrow service.
Okay, I've got Toby, then Steve, then David. Toby.
Thank you. My understanding is that there were a number of users who were effectively abusing the service. I can't remember where I heard this, but somebody was commuting from Cajun to Clevedon. I would, as Audit Committee, I think we need to know what was done to deal with individual abusive use of the service.
Okay, well, they weren't technically abusing it because they could use it for that purpose. And of course, the zonal changes which are being introduced next month will stop that. Perhaps that's the short answer. We started off with 3 very large zones, and there was absolutely nothing stopping someone from using it for that purpose.
Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I guess one of the useful points about this scheme is that it enables you to capture data from the users, so that in the fanciful world where we're able to restore supported bus services, when there's a limitless amount of money coming towards local authorities, you'll know which services we actually need. Is there a better way of capturing that data that you'd like to spend the money on?
So I hospital pass to Kirsty here.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Sorry about that.
Sorry, that's
Kirsty.
okay. Yeah, sorry, I'm Westlink DRT PM project manager. Sorry, do you mind rephrasing that? Sorry.
Yeah, I probably ought to rephrase it. One of the advantages of schemes like this scheme, and the one that we did under the last item on the agenda, is the data that we're able to capture from it on how people use buses. An example, before COVID, I used to only use buses and perhaps catch 8 or 10 a day. Hop off of what? Hop. Get on an X39, get off of that, get on an 8, get off of that, get on a number 1 or a number 2, get off of that and catch another 8 to go and get some lunch. Because I don't like walking very much. I don't know whether you're able to capture data about my bus usage other than via my movements using a mobile phone. We all know that our phones are tracked all the time, and that information is accessible to us and among others. Is there, aside from the data that you're able to capture from patronage of the bookings, is there a better way of capturing usage data than that scheme that you'd like to use and you currently don't? This is a value for money question.
Yeah,
I guess.
In terms of Westlink, there isn't. We can only get the data, the origin and the destination.
Right.
And at that point, we can't work out if they're getting onto another bus or whether that's their end location.
That's the data that I would have thought would have been of most use to you, because this scheme is really an enabler to get to the next mode, isn't it?
It's probably worth also making the point that the commercial bus network is exactly that. And obviously private bus operators have
They don't want to share their data.
No, exactly, and it's commercially sensitive as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Sorry about the hospital plans.
That's rugby, sorry.
It was a very specific question, because I noticed one of the actions or improvements you're making is to roll out a wider engagement plan with stakeholders. I just wondered who you saw the stakeholders as being for this other than the passengers, and what the objective of the engagement plan is in terms of improving the service.
Well, we need, going back a couple of steps, one of our concerns or issues with DRT was that people don't know how to use it. As Bob said earlier, you can use it to go from one end of the zone to the other, because we need to educate people how to use it. So that's going to be one of the main things. Obviously, we need to engage on the changes so that people are aware of those changes. But it will also be an opportunity to talk to people and communicate how to use DRT effectively and what it's for. Because essentially it's not for every single journey. And at the moment it is trying to be every journey for everyone. And that's where the struggle comes, apart from the sheer amount of demand for the service. So stakeholders, obviously UAs, councillors, the public, everyone needs to know how to use this, and so that we're in the process of working with the comms team to come up with that engagement strategy and the plan and how we're going to do it effectively, because that is one of the key things that we need to do for the service to give it the best run that for the next year as a minimum, really.
Thank you.
So not for discussion now, because we could be here for another 3 hours if we start this, but one of my concerns is that this is coming from funding that runs out. And I'm not sure whether we shouldn't be asking for a report at the next meeting of the Audit Committee that, or the one after that, that indicates what is envisaged to replace this, because whatever the issues and challenges that have come out of it, we know it meets part of a need that has to be addressed. So I do wonder, members, it needs to be a very open request for a report, because we need officers to tell us what ought to be being considered. But it just seems to me that the risks in terms of service delivery to our residents are potentially pretty huge, and therefore continuing a scheme that only solves a problem whilst the scheme's in place raises a large number of questions.
Is that an audit question though, Jeff, or is that a scrutiny question?
And not entirely sure, actually, because it's a question that needs to be raised somewhere. But I think you're right to question that. But in terms of value for money, it's also a question if we're promoting a project that is time limited, are we concentrating those funds in the right way? So perhaps that is very much something that between officers and scrutiny, we need to identify where it goes. And I'm not precious where it goes, but it needs to go somewhere.
Can I just say, Jeff, that because of that time limited aspect of the scheme, officers are confronted with what is unfortunately a pretty thankless task there. So because it's thankless, have mine.
But I suggest, members, that unless anyone's got him burning, that we now simply note that. But thank you for the report, and I think I just think emphasising the lessons learned aspect of these things, because the question about the 18-mile commute, I'm not saying that could have been anticipated in advance, but it's again about putting in measurements that might have highlighted that was a problem. I understand what you said, that you probably couldn't have changed it even if you'd known it was a problem, but I think how we measure and capture that information is really important. Members happy to note? Okay, thank you. So item 18 is feedback session. As that's likely to be that I've allowed this meeting to go on too long, I'm not going to take any comments from anybody. But if you do have any comments, please email them to Tim. And yeah, please.
Because this will be the last meeting for a number of Bristol City Council colleagues. And I just wanted to say thank you for all your work on behalf of the other two unitary authorities which had elections last year, and to wish you all the best, whether you're standing again or not. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. It is an interesting point, because although two of the Bristol councillors are not standing, the rest of us are. But as it's dependent on both our electorate, our party whips, and the proportionality of all the other councillors elected in the city, and in some cases whether people might find themselves chairing committees next year, none of us will have a clue whether we're back, probably until sometime in June. So thank you for those good wishes. Oh, I thought you said you were going to be on a bus, Steve. So yeah, thank you for that. Item 19 points to refer to main committee. We've noted those as we've gone along. Tim, if you can let me have a note of those sort of sometime in the next couple of days, and I'll try and pull together something that we can circulate. In which case, I will bring this meeting to a close. Thank you all for bearing with us. I was thinking during that period that it isn't so long ago, Richard, that had we had all these items on the agenda, we'd have had about 2 officers to present them, because they'd have been doing the same thing. And it's fascinating to see how the authority has grown and have it demonstrated in that way. I do hope you will convey that where we ask questions, I always remind people it is a compliment that we want to ask them questions, and it's not a negative engagement process. But we've covered so much ground this morning, so thank you. Solange, between you and Tim, could you thank all the officers who have attended and given us such a detailed background? Jennifer and Christine, thank you for being with us. We can perhaps have a discussion after this and either help explain things that you didn't follow, or please take your comments on things we ought to be doing differently. And obviously to statutory officers, thank you all for your time. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.